All right, everybody, welcome back to the Made for the Range YouTube channel and now the Made for the Range podcast of some sort. Not sure if I'm going to change the title of this eventually. There's probably a heavy chance that I do, but for now, we're going to stick with Made for the Range podcast. I have the absolute pleasure of having Sean Toulon as the very first guest on this podcast, which, and like, I know you might roll your eyes as I say this again, but I'm a giant fan of Sean. Sean has done so much in the industry that people don't know, and I want to dive into a bunch of that today.
Sure.
And then also we're now in, kind of the third life of Toulon, I guess you could say. This time there was no...
I feel like a cat.
Yeah, there was no 5-minute retirement this time.
No.
And we're diving back into a new breath for Toulon, which we'll talk about as we get further into this.
Great.
But yeah, so if somebody had no idea who you were, which, just let people know kind of how you started in the industry, and then just a high level of where you've been throughout, and then I'll get into some of the more specific questions about some of that.
I'm a golfer, just like you are, Jake, and from like age 12, and I think my path, growing up in the Midwest, my path similar to so many young kids. I played baseball until I was sure that I wasn't going to be a major leaguer, which was about 11. The first time I saw a curveball, I knew I should become a golfer.
Okay.
And I fell in love with the game at a really early age. Started out as a caddy. And what struck me was not just the game, but golfers themselves and the way they spoke, the way they carried themselves, the way they treated other people. There was a reverence to it that was really cool. I loved it. And then I got to play a lot of golf with my dad when we could, which was typically 9 holes Sunday morning. And I quickly became much better than him. He was a very good athlete and a terrible golfer. But I just really took to the game, and I knew I wanted to be around golf or in golf at a really, really young age. So I just followed that path.
Awesome. And then, so you've worked at some very large companies. You started a couple smaller ones that are in the depths of golf history at this point. And then, like we said, this is the third breath for Toulon. So what was your start in the industry from from an equipment standpoint? Because I know, like I said earlier, you're responsible for leading teams or directly responsible for some crazy products that have like legendary products that people like me or, guys like WRX kind of guys or guys like Ryan Barath, like we still talk about those products.
Right.
So what led you down that path? Because like, I don't care about the golf swing, right? I care about golf equipment. And there's only select few of us that care so much about the equipment itself.
Right.
And so it's always interesting to see, like, how did you get onto the equipment-focused path?
Sure. Well, I was lucky enough to go to work for a little startup company right after I finished school. I went to University of Wisconsin, and I graduated in December of '82. And as I said earlier, I knew I wanted to be in golf. And I was a good player, but, certainly not a tour quality player. And I was sure I didn't want to be a club pro.
Okay.
I thought maybe at first I wanted to be, and then decided against that. And so I knew I just loved the game. I loved golfers, and I especially became really fond of equipment. So right when I finished school, I took a job for a little company, believe it or not, selling animal head covers.
Okay. Sure.
For just a wonderful Korean fella that owned this company called XM Sports, and it wasn't the sexiest beginnings to a career, I wouldn't think, but I went out and I sold these animal head covers everywhere. My territory was pretty much anywhere I could go. I was living in Madison, Wisconsin at the time. Did a really good job, and about 6 months into it, I got a call from a fellow named John Steinbach, who passed a couple years ago, just a wonderful man, asking if I might be interested in applying for an opening for this little tiny startup company called TaylorMade. And so I said, sure, I'd love to. So they were based in McHenry, Illinois, not that far, about an hour and a half drive. Actually, I was living in Milwaukee at the time. So I went and visited TaylorMade like the next day. And I met John, who was great, and I met this man that I would say forever, I get emotional, forever changed my life. And he was the guy that founded TaylorMade. And he was just one of those guys, Jake, that was just so instrumental in so many things, but he was so inspirational to me. His name was Gary Adams. And Gary took me under, let me slow down for a second. I got the job, right? So I interviewed 2 days in a row, and I had lunch with Gary, and I just fell in love with this guy. He was one of those guys, Jake, that whenever he spoke, whatever he spoke about, you came away so excited, so energized, so positive, and just, believing you could kind of do anything, right? So he had this tiny little company, which they forgot to tell me when I got the job was about an hour from being bankrupt. That would have been good information to know. I'm kind of glad I didn't know. But when I started with TaylorMade, it was about $12 million in revenue. And my territory was Wisconsin, Minnesota, North and South Dakota. And humbly, I will say, I did a phenomenal job and became one of the most decorated salesmen in TaylorMade history, which is something that means a lot. So I would say that's how I really got started with it. And being around Gary, you just started to believe that you were capable of doing almost anything. So that's how I got involved in the equipment side of it. And then, I got to learn more and more and more and more about equipment. And I think what set me apart from so many of the other really good salespeople, and there were tons of them, was I dug so deep into the equipment that I not only knew everything about our equipment, I knew everything about everybody's equipment. So I'm sure I knew more about equipment of other companies than those reps did. And it was just important to me for my customers to see me as the undisputed expert. And that was important. And I worked hard to be that.
Well, and there's a lot of truth built into that too, because there are times where, when you talk about equipment the right way, it's not about what equipment is better than other equipment. It's about what equipment is best for that person that you're trying to get it in the hands of, or the pro that's going to sell it to the guys at their club, or whatever the case may be. And there's so many different avenues. And I think that's what I'm trying to portray the most with what I'm doing now is I haven't done, and I won't do a comparison like brand over brand, because for me, the brand can sell themselves, but the person needs to know from a technology standpoint and from an engineering standpoint why one head was made the way it was and another one was, and which one of those would be better for them. So from an equipment standpoint, it's always such an interesting conversation, because and I've talked to other guys in the field, in the golf industry, about this, of focusing on the engineering and the equipment of it, and like almost battling the marketing at the same time, because the marketing can usually take it one direction, and that's great for a retail environment or for like an online environment where they're trying to just get a sale out of it directly. But when you talk about people playing better golf, it matters what equipment they play and knowing the equipment that they play. So you had a really long run at TaylorMade. Then you ended up, what was your final title at TaylorMade?
Executive Vice President.
You're just Executive Vice President of everybody.
Yeah, I guess you could. I was Mark King's right-hand man, I would say.
Yeah.
But I was really in charge of all of the product.
And what was the first product that you can say you had the majority of ownership over, essentially?
I'll tell you exactly what it was. It was 300 series. So when I came back, Mark had just been appointed president, and I had an 11.5-month stint at Cobra, working for Acushnet, which is a wonderful company. It was a terrible fit for me.
Okay. But that was Acushnet Cobra, right? When there was that little overhang of parent
company. So I reported
yeah.
directly to Wally Uline, and Wally was amazing. But as a TaylorMade guy, I was just, from Gary, I was wired to believe that you could do anything, and that the best time to do it is now. And the other companies that I either worked for or was around, had a very different attitude. And, we thought we could take the world by storm. So my very first product, and I can remember to the day, so I started, this is amazing actually, my first day back was January 3rd, 2000. It was the day after Gary Adams died. So, one of the things that I felt was important was that Gary was really honored and remembered, right? And I'm a big believer in fate, and I don't think that date was by accident. And I wanted to make sure that TaylorMade would find its rightful place in the history of the game. So, anyways, so I got to work, and everybody was expecting TaylorMade in 2000 to come up with a new driver, because that's what they did, right? And so I started to, as I got there, I started to rummage around R&D, and there's some incredibly brilliant people there. One of them, Benoit Vincent, who was in charge of R&D, and another guy named Dick Ruggie, who left shortly after I got there to go and take on the equipment role at the USGA. But so I started to look and see, what are we working on, and what do we have, and what are your thoughts? And Benoit, French, in so many ways, said to me, we have a new device, or we have a new thought. It's called NCC. I said, oh, that's cool. What does it stand for? New Club Concept. I said, okay, marketing guys haven't hit this yet, so maybe there's some goods here. So what is it? And it was really a very in-depth study on different types of golf swings and what type of equipment might work for those, right? And what they found was there were really 3 buckets of players. So the way I look at things and began to create, it's a quote from Steve Jobs on how do creative people come up with ideas. And Jobs will say, when I talk to the most creative people, it's almost like they're somewhat ashamed, because maybe they didn't really have the idea, but they were able to take their life's experiences and have them as little dots or data points that they could draw on, right? And the people that I would say have become the most creative, and I would humbly lump myself in there, would be the people that are able to connect those dots, right?
Absolutely.
To take current information, draw on things that maybe they heard or learned or experienced, and put them together in some new, unique, and fresh way. So NCC was this cool idea. And I said, okay, well, how are we going to determine what a player is? Oh, one player is hands, one player is body in a very French accent, one player is this. I said, that's all cool, but how do we find out? We do not know. Well, that is a problem, right? So how are we going? We need a piece of diagnostic equipment if that's what we're going to do. So that was a super interesting thought and idea, but there was no way, shape, or form was it ready. So I started to think more about the marketplace. And in the marketplace at the time, there were 3 really powerful drivers. One was a 975D.
Yep.
One was a Ping TSI, and one was the Callaway Big Bertha at the time. And if you looked at the launch conditions that each one of these clubs produced, it was very different. The 975D was sort of low launch, sort of a low spin. Was really good for faster swing speeds and ball speeds, which, there weren't really launch monitors at the time, right? I mean, this was pre-TrackMan. This is 2000. And then there was the Callaway driver, which was sort of a mid-launch, pretty spinny driver. So guys that would use that would be Ernie Els like that driver, Jim Furyk like that driver. It was not the biggest subset, but it was a powerful one. And then the final one was the Ping TSI driver, which was a monster at the time. Wasn't the prettiest thing, so that didn't help it. But it was sort of this thing that was hidden. So taking the experiences that I talked about, so here's this concept called NCC, And there's different types of swings and I had just come off of Zevo Golf, which, I'd spent 7 years really being around fitting golfers to proper equipment and developing systems and thoughts. And, your brain is just in that zone. So I had all of that information. I had what Benoit had just told me. And then the marketplace is telling you one driver fits none. Yeah. And if you're going to do a good job, maybe we need to do something different. So long-winded answer to my very first product, I wrote the product plan on January 11th. So on my 8th day at the office, we created what was known as the 300 series. 300, 320, 360. Everybody was expecting TaylorMade to come out with one, and it was like, holy shit. Yeah. 3?
Well, and this was at a time too where like the what's the right way to say it? The stock shaft conversation wasn't really a thing. Like it was way more about you would switch brands to switch heads to switch launch conditions rather than what everybody knows now as pretty much everybody has 3, some have 4 buckets of drivers, but then even within those drivers, like the biggest nerdiest thing that I get into is shafts. And we know that, within those buckets of drivers, you can also adapt those drivers into sub-buckets of those buckets.
That's right.
It's gotten so crazy now, which is great for everybody, right? Yeah. It's great for the game of golf. It lets people play better golf. But at the time, with the launch of the 300 series, I think, like, obviously I wasn't in golf around then. I've just heard the stories from everybody about that time. But the 300 series is also, when people make media and they're like, hey, let's hit an old driver, like everybody, it's almost all of those videos is using a 300 series because sometimes it still keeps up. Like whenever somebody goes back and it's like, let's compare today's technology to old technology, like everybody uses the 300 series for those comparisons.
Well, if you can find an R360, R meaning RNA, which was when they bifurcated COR, the R was hotter, like 860. Help yourself. It's a good one.
It's still going to hold up.
It's very nice. Yeah.
So then from the launch of the 300, what was the last product that you had your name on at TaylorMade? I know that it was probably something that actually came out after you had officially left TaylorMade. But what was that product?
M1 and M2.
Okay, so that's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify and make sure on that because I think that is my statement for most people is you're, I think, more popularized by your work with Callaway because your name was on everything physically, right? Like everything physically said Toulon, and people really associate you with those putters, but like the Zevo story sometimes gets lost. And I think the metal work at TaylorMade, and we'll talk about some of the putter work to TaylorMade too, but the metalwoods work at TaylorMade was phenomenal. I mean, you go all the way from the 300 series, everything with an R on it, even R15, which I'm not going to give you too much junk about, but sweet spot of a fingernail. But
we weren't perfect.
I would argue that within that span, I think R15 might have been the only miss, honestly. Like everything else did a really, really good job. And the R15 was perfect for the tour guys. And that was, so my introduction to the golf equipment space was right at the launch, basically of R15. So my very first introduction into golf was Jordan Spieth winning 3 majors, Jason Day being world number 1, and the TaylorMade team at that time was Jason Day, Dustin Johnson, and then that was like right as the Nike stuff ended. So Rory was coming on board. Like TaylorMade had the most incredible. That was when Sergio was still extremely relevant.
I know it's like they combined the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
It was wild what TaylorMade's tour staff was at that moment in 15 to 17 basically, and so my introduction was with my first driver was a used R1 because I thought that the very advanced, technologically amazing sole plate adjustability was really cool.
Super cool.
Yeah. And then I played exclusively a TaylorMade driver all the way through M2 basically, and then I later found out that all of that stuff was kind of under the umbrella of one man, and then that was when the equipment obsession started, and that's where my admiration for you and the underappreciation I felt of like the stuff that you've been responsible for, whether it was directly or with teams, because I know you're a very big team guy. Like you're never one that's going to shut down the rest of your team. I know that. So
You can tell that to Tony and Joe and Preston sometimes.
Yeah, well, Preston has his own accolades that I would give him, but I don't need to have him smile too much back there. But so walk us through the evolution of that from, because there's so much in there, right? And we don't have time. Eventually, I think we'll do a whole nother one of these just about 300 to M2, but there was so much evolution in there. So first off, the white driver was giant. So can we talk about that release? How the heck did that come up?
Can I go back to one thing beforehand?
You can go back wherever you need to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I left something
Okay.
out on the 300 series. That became a smash hit, and TaylorMade. This is when you know you have a product problem. When I got there, they had 27 staff players paid to play the driver, and the average count, Darrell survey count, was 7, which means
there's 20 guys not filling their contract.
Yeah, so that usually means you got an issue, right?
Wow.
And Gary Adams told me a long time ago, Toulon, just remember one thing: products don't lie. They either work or they don't, and if they work, the marketplace will figure that out, and if they don't, the marketplace will figure that out, right? So what Benoit and his team were able to do on the 300 series. So basically what we did is the 300 was to go directly against the 975D.
Sure.
320 against the Callaway driver and the Ping driver. We needed a club that would take that down. That was the 360. What Benoit had neglected to tell us is they were just starting to sniff around this concept of COR. And what we had were drivers that were amazingly fast compared to everybody else. Not only did they fit each golfer better, but we had a better 975D. We had a better Callaway.
Sure.
And we had a way better Ping TSI. I got a call from one of the best club professional players in the country, who I had happened to know and know well to this day. His name's Brett Upper. He played the tour for 8 years. And I came to my office, and my little red light on the phone is lighting up. And so I had a message. I play it back. He says, "Thule, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I just got this driver, and I swear to God, I think I'm 50 yards longer with this driver." And it was a 360 with the Fujikura SIX shaft. And he got ahead, and he took it to Mark Timms, and this is right up your alley, buddy.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Took it to Mark Timms. He put in this Fuji 6 in it, and that driver lit up Scottsdale, and it was called the TaylorMade 804. And I said, why in the world is it called the TaylorMade 804? Because that's what we charge people for it. And this is in the year 2000, and I'm telling you, it was crazy. But back to the whole thing about, okay, as I'm writing the product plan for the 300 series, it was all golfers need something that fits them specifically. And a given club is only capable of producing one set of launch conditions, which is why one's no good, but 3 made a lot of sense. And as soon as I swear to God, as soon as I put that down on the piece of paper, that a club is only capable of producing one set of launch conditions, I thought, why?
Yeah.
Why would that be? Or more importantly, what if it could change? And that day, the next day, we started work on the R7 quad, movable weights, right? So movable weights was born through the 300 series, but that was the genesis of the idea was, what if, right? And if you could move that amount of mass into different positions of the club head, you could change it. And I was at, in 2004, I was at Wentworth for the European Tour launch of the R7 quad. We got there on Tuesday, got out on the range on Tuesday. By Wednesday, we had 42 drivers committed in play.
Oh, I can imagine.
In one day, it became the dominant number one played driver on tour. One day. It was amazing. So that was super cool.
Yeah, so speaking of R7, so I actually have, over the last 5-6 months, I have accumulated all of the R7 models, and I have them all. And the biggest thing about R7, I think, was it was the first time that there was the sub buckets of the buckets, right? Because the movable weight technology, obviously you could transfer it between the head and maybe fit somebody slightly unique for that head. But to me, it was actually, looking back, it seems like it's really the first time that there was a CG story in a lineup of heads, because if you look at something like the R7 Draw, right, the shape of that thing from the bottom is so unique. And actually, until the recent launch of QI10 Max, which is their, 10K whatever one now.
Right.
And the first thing I said to the guys at the Kingdom when I picked it up and turned it over, I was like, wow, this is very R7 Draw-ish. And the one fitter looked at me and he was like, yeah, it's pretty similar to that shape. And because they just cut out of the toe, basically. They were like, look, why are we trying to make the soul of something look good instead of making the performance that we need out of this to be very specific for that player? And the evolution of that now obviously is like that has now bled into every manufacturer, and everybody has 3, again, sometimes 4 buckets of that golfer now. And the catalyst of that being what you guys did at TaylorMade with those drivers is really, really cool. And the tour story used to be way more prevalent too, right? We had, like, when that occurred on tour for you guys with R7, it bled into what became the big tour story that I knew of R15 and the guys that were playing it and the stories on tour.
Right.
Nowadays, just like, not to jump around too much, but what do you see now with equipment? Because the tour stories are, I would say, less prevalent now, right? There's a lot less people concerned about what a tour player is playing. And that's side A of this question. Side B is, what are your thoughts on guys like Collin Morikawa, right? Collin Morikawa played a driver model through 4 years of his contract without switching into the new one. What does that do to a product specialist or an engineer or an R&D person at those companies? Does it anger them, or does it invigorate them to really just keep trying to do better because a top 10 player in the world is not switching?
Right. Well, it should do both, right? So right off the get-go, you should be disappointed. You should be angry, but not at him. You should be angry at yourself. I go back to what Gary said, products don't lie. So Collin wasn't using it because it wasn't demonstrably better, right? To use a Ely Callaway phrase. So if it's not working better, why would you change, right? I wouldn't. So that means you got a lot of work to do. So you haven't figured it out. I got invited, this is years ago, probably 2008, to be on a panel to talk about equipment at St. Andrews. And on the panel was Kyle Phillips, who designed Kings Barnes and many great golf courses. Robert Trent Jones was there, who was very cool. Somebody was there from the R&A. I can't remember. It may have been Martin Slumbers. But anyways, it was a pretty distinguished panel, and it was really about equipment and has equipment gone too far. And
this was in 2008.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So they were, even at that time, they thought equipment was going too far, and now we're dealing with rollbacks.
So I had a book, which I probably left there by accident, right? But I started, so I was the bad guy, right? Because I was the equipment guy, right? Yeah. And everybody else was pretty much anti-equipment, which I am way okay being the bad guy in a situation like that. But I had a book that was, and I read a passage in the book, and the passage was basically, I'll paraphrase, thankfully, all of the great and powerful ideas to change and improve equipment have been exhausted. And I read that, and then I read the date that it was written in. It was written in 1925, right? And then, so it's been the ongoing battle, right? It's been the ongoing thing. And when these companies work and don't get a breakthrough, that just means they haven't looked in the right spots, or they haven't looked hard enough. And if you look at what Callaway is doing now with AI and the iterative process that they can go through, I mean, literally tens and tens of thousands of iterations in 2 weeks. they can go through to find out an answer, right? So now their output is only as good as their human inputs on what they're asking the algorithms to do. But the equipment is going to continue to get better and better and better and better. And that's, the governing bodies know that, and that's what they're afraid of. To some extent, they should be. But to answer your question, they should be upset and they should be invigorated because they haven't either looked hard enough or they haven't looked in the right spots.
Sure. Okay, so then just zooming back then. So white driver story. How the heck did that happen?
It was the genius, I would say, and he doesn't get credit for it, but I would say the genesis of the idea was from Mark King. And what Mark said is, you can do it any color that you want, Toulon, but it can't be black. Because they just all look the same, which was really interesting. And I'll tell you why it became so important. So literally, we did prototypes in 15 colors. A beautiful, beautiful sort of a candy, sort of Ferrari red, but candy. I have a yellow one, I think, in Tony's office here. I've
seen the yellow one,
sort of I actually played that driver for a long time. That was really cool. We did one called Escalade White, which was sort of a pearly white. And then, we did all these different ones, silver, charcoal. But the one, when we put them out in front of people, that would freak people out, cause all of the emotion, was the white one, and not the Escalade one.
It was matte white, yeah.
It was a matte white. When we did it in a gloss white, it looked pretty feminine. And the person that really came up with the concept of let's try it in matte was Tom Olsavsky, who's now at Cobra, right? Who worked for me for years, and just a wonderful guy. But it was all of these people, but King was the one who drove it. It can't be this, and then we just kept putting these different ideas in front of people. We didn't put it in front of focus groups and things like that, because nobody's going to say, I want a white driver. I mean, we already knew that, right? But what is
you were
the
giving
one?
it to them whether they liked it or
not. Right. But if you put it in front of Martin Keimer, who is not a backslapping funny German guy, right? He's a pretty serious guy. Or put it in front of Nick Faldo, which we did at the time, and they just said, oh my God, I think that thing is awesome. Put it in front of Sergio Garcia over and over again. And I told King, these tour players, they love this thing. So the really cool thing about it, because you talked about the tour earlier, is TaylorMade would always have about 60 drivers in play. Darryl survey, like year after year after year after year, which was a dominant number one. And when we got R11 done, the white driver, and put it out on tour, we had exactly 60 drivers in play. So we had the exact same amount. But when the head cover came off of Luke Donald, who was then, it was number one in the world, and it wasn't a Mizuno, but it was a white driver, not a black one, they knew it was a TaylorMade, right? And all of a sudden, when you started, it was like that poor offensive lineman who jumps offside two plays in a row, and they call his number 71, blah, blah, blah. The poor guy, everybody knows.
Yeah,
that schmuck did it again, right? So when people saw the white driver, 60 of them, it looked like the PGA Tour was a TaylorMade sales meeting. It was crazy. And our business just went from here like that. It exploded.
Wow. I was just with Tio a couple weeks ago doing content at Cobra. I had no idea he was involved in that decision. So that's next time I see him, I'm going to bring that up and talk to him about it. That's really cool. Okay, so white driver exploded. White driver lasted through M2, because M4, M5, it was silver.
We had actually moved away from the white driver for SLDR.
So I had a white SLDR though, but it wasn't the retail. It wasn't the first launch, because it was normal SLDR was like a matte gray on top. I wouldn't call it silver. It was
a charcoal gray, but it wasn't matte.
Okay.
It was magnificent. I thought it was beautiful. It was a really interesting club. It was a great club for a good player with speed.
Yeah, well, an SLDR 440 is one of those things that people still, to this day, I know Ian Fraser is one of those guys.
Yeah.
Ian and I have talked about SLDR 440, because that's still if you can find somebody that can hit that thing out of the middle.
Right.
And plus, again, we could have a whole TaylorMade talk by itself, because like the SLD marketing campaign of Loft Up, like that was so cool. I still remember those days. That actually,
we had a bunch of guys win with 12-degree lofted drivers. A bunch.
Because DJ was in 12 degrees when he was playing, and that's the last person you think would be in something that high lofted. That actually brings up a good point, though. So there was a time period with TaylorMade where there was a, I guess the right way is like a premier line, but then there was a bonded line too, right? So when they became adjustable, there was also a bonded. So I believe SLDR was attached to rocket balls originally, and then the one that I remember the most is R15, and then it had Aero Burner as the bonded. Now that one is funny to me because there was a bunch of Aero Burners on tour, which I don't think was the plan. I think having R15 mostly on tour was the plan.
But the best product always wins, right? Yeah.
So what's the catalyst of that? Because you had buckets with the premier line, we'll call it, and then with the bonded stuff, what was the reasoning for that? Like, why offer a bonded driver? Because that's when people started making a lot of
cost price, right? So as soon as you begin to add complications, whether it's a putter or a driver, they become more expensive, right? And driver prices were starting to get up there pretty high. So, then it was, there was typically a $399 or even a $449 or something like that. And then there was a need in the marketplace for maybe something that was cheaper. So something like $299. And you'll remember when we did the Bomber and the Technician, which was R7, and it was R7 Super Quad, and then a burner. I can't remember the one it was now, but it was, if you were a bomber, you just grabbed a driver and swung for the fences and hit it as hard as you could. And and what was really interesting is the tour was sort of bifurcating. So there was a guy like Mike Weir is a perfect example. When you would watch Mike Weir, whether you were at the golf course with him or at a photo shoot or whatever, talk about the driver. It was like, it goes this way or this way or this way. And he would talk very specifically. And he wasn't trying to hit a fairway. He was trying to hit specific parts of a fairway, right?
Gotcha.
So he was very much a technician. And Retief Goosen is Sergio, definitely a technician, right?
Yeah.
And in the ad, we had one of the ads was Sergio hitting it this way with an R7 with an adjustable driver, and Goose hitting it the other way, Bomber, with a burner of some sort, right?
Yeah.
And what it was, so I was so struck by the stark differences that we started to look at designing clubs not just through numbers, but we started to look really through the psychographics of a golfer, right? And so somebody that was a technician, they looked at the world differently, and the way the clubs were designed, because I led the industrial design and graphic design teams as well. We started to really design the clubs so that they would match sort of the psychology of the different type of golfer. So if you remember burner clubs were more overtly designed with graphics and things like that on the top.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right? And the R clubs, for the most part, were not. So we really started to design as much for a mindset as we did for numbers. That was pretty cool. And it was really successful.
Wow. Okay, so that we don't sit here for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so putters now.
Yes.
I know that started at TaylorMade. So I do want to talk a little bit about that because I think that is an area that people probably don't understand the things that you could get accredited for. And I think some people will be very surprised by those products. And then obviously as you moved into your 5-minute retirement before going into Callaway.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us about the TaylorMade side of putters and what you did there. Again, we can go pretty high level with this, and then because I want to jump into the new Toulon too.
Yep. So TaylorMade, was a driver company, and then was starting to become an iron company, but was nowhere to be found in putters. And we wanted to do something that was noticeably different. So there was the whole creation of Rosa. I enjoy cars.
Yeah.
So there was a definite sort of nod to Ferrari at least. And we developed this insert that was made out of a special grade of aluminum that included some titanium in it. And it was able to be anodized, so we anodized it red. But it was basically taking weight out of the middle of the putter and increasing the inertia. We spent a lot of time getting the shapes right, and I spent a lot of time working with a gentleman named Kia Ma, which I think a lot of people probably don't know, but Kia was one of the great sort of putter builders. Not so much a designer, but a putter builder, and mechanically kind of knew how they went together and could understand really well intricacies of shape and radii and blends and how to do all of that, and just was a wizard at kind of tying the whole package together. So Rosa was created and started to really gain some traction. And then that spilled over into this AGSI insert, which was an insert to create more forward roll, which was great. And then we worked hard to develop a mallet that we felt could really, look different, but perform differently. And we created Spider. And my first experience with Spider was with Jim Furyk. And I met Jim at Cog Hill during the Western Open.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I had the first prototype of the Spider. And Jim loved putters. And we're on the putting green, and he hits the first putt with it. And it had the AGSI insert in it as well, but it was crazy high inertia. It was just a magnificent product. And he hit the first putt, and he said, "Oh, my God." I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "Is the ball supposed to hug the ground like that?" I said, "Well, it is a putt."
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But you could hear the roll was better. So that was really cool. And that took off like crazy. And I had monumental battles with the marketing department to put money against the putter category, specifically Spider, because our count was going like this. And I remember at one point Bob Majori was running marketing, which I wasn't, so he had control of that budget. And I said, "Majori, you either start running ads or I'm going to do them myself, so you pick." And King was, he said, "That's awesome."
I mean, there's so many. So this is I'm not sure what the right question here is, but that has to sit with you some certain way, that you are responsible in some way, shape, or form for products that now, like, I'll use Ping as an example, right? The answer shape. Everybody's got their own version of an answer shape now, but like that happened with Spider, and I don't think I don't think it's evolved quite far enough, right? Like the answer shape has been so historical and so long, but Spider is growing in its age, essentially, and you have Spider shapes from multiple manufacturers now, and it's not like a hidden thing. It's and the companies will say, like, look, everybody's got their version of an answer shape, and now we all have to have our versions of the Spider shape.
Or the number 7 or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there's other examples of it, but for you personally, right, and talking to your wife and your sons and stuff, it's hard to realize that influence, right? And I don't think you do it for influence. I don't get that from you ever for anything that I see you do.
Mm-hmm.
But that does have to sit with you in some way. It's like knowing that there's this whole branch of golf that has happened because of you. Like, does it? I just don't know how that would make me feel. So I'm trying to figure out how that sits with you.
Yeah. Well, number one, thanks for the question. The easy answer for me is I don't care.
Yeah. I thought that was what you were going to say.
I don't. I only care about what we do next. And, I don't collect things. I don't have, a whole bunch of things in a locker. Tony does, for sure, my son.
Well, I'm glad Tony does, because if you didn't, nobody would have them, and then all this stuff would be lost.
But I only really care about what we're going to do next and how we're going to get something that excites the golfer. And nothing gets me more excited than when we do a new putter and we put it in front of a golfer and they just go, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
And, it's really simple. We're looking to create an emotion. And if I had to sum it all up in one word, it's lust. That when you look at it, when you think about these putters that we do, whether it's small batch or our upcoming 2024 collection, we're selling these putters to, a lot of our customers and clients. They have a bunch of putters, right?
Yeah.
So they don't really need it, right? But when they look at it and we've done our job really right, they just look at it and they go like, I have to have this, right? My life will be better only if I have that in it. And that's what we're trying to do, right? And can we make these things so exquisitely beautiful that you have to have it, right?
Yeah.
So there's an old thing that I learned long ago, again from Gary, was people buy with emotion and justify with logic. And the emotion that we're looking for, again, is like, oh my God. And if I go into a golf shop and I look at a club that somebody did and it's done really well, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
Because it's just like that, hats off, man. That is, or lady, that is really, really good work. That gets me excited.
Yeah. So I have one more spin-off question of what you just said that I've been waiting for a good time to ask, but then we can finally, we'll get into your 5-minute retirement, the original Toulon design, the Callaway version of that, as well as obviously I do want to get into what we're doing now. What's the product that it doesn't matter when it was released, it can be as old as you want. What is the product since you've been in the industry that has come out that you didn't do that you were like, damn, like I wish I had my name on that?
AP.2 iron.
Oh, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about that got you as excited as you clearly are about it?
Just the entire concept of it was, and I guess maybe they've sort of recreated that with this T150, but the idea of a company that is so traditional beginning to embrace technology and new thinking, which you wouldn't say that's what they do best, right? Respectfully. I mean, they do all kinds of things best. But that wouldn't be the thing that you would say, oh my God, that is the most innovative company. They don't come up in that.
Yeah,
right?
no, that's not the title.
Which doesn't mean they're not capable, but that's not how people think of them. But that iron was a different way to look at providing performance for a better player. And I just think when that came out, it was like,
yeah. That became the iron a lot of people chased, basically.
Agreed.
It's funny that you say the T150 example, because I was talking to Mikey from TXG the other day, actually, and it wasn't the other day. It was when the release of the new T-Series came out. We both hit them, and I called Mikey, and we were talking about it, and I told him, I was like, look, the 150 is not for me, but the player that it's for is going to be phenomenal, and I was like, I can't quite figure out why this feels the way it feels. And his first thing, he was like, dude, in 10 years, when we're talking about equipment stuff, he's like, we are right now realizing the launch of the new AP2.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is such a good way to put it, because
I think it is.
It's not just us that's felt like that too. I know that a lot of people have made that comparison. Okay, so then jumping into Toulon as a brand. So you retired from TaylorMade. Basically, you went to bed, you woke up, you unretired, and you started Toulon Design. I know that's not exactly the story, but for lack of a better way of saying it.
Well, Tony and Joe really started and asked me to join.
Okay.
Right. And it was really interesting because I had just finished playing a round of golf with Scotty, and we had a wonderful day together and sort of rekindled a friendship that was strained because of competitive stuff.
And you're member guest champions
together a long time ago.
I think I'm going to use that is going to be the first social clip from this podcast is Sean Toulon and Scotty Cameron are member guest champions together at Shadow Ridge. Yeah,
a long time ago, 30 years ago.
I got to go take a shot of that photo and put it in here.
The trophy's still there. Anyways, and I came home, and Tone and Joe said, hey, what do you think about this idea? And they laid out the whole plan, and I said, well, let's think about it a little bit more. And it was to do really high-end milled putters and compete against Scotty. And the part of it that was weird is 45 minutes before that, I was having a beer with him. But when you really dug into it, there are other people that were making nice putters at the time, but Scotty was a dominant number one. And then Bettinardi would have been a number two. But we felt like we could bring some things to the table that would allow us to move quicker than it would be in other categories. And it's something that both Tony and Joe and now Preston were really passionate about. So and so am I, because there's so much more freedom and art that can go into a putter than a mallet. Mallets can look like anything. Blades not quite as much, but mallets can be anything. So that part was really cool. We dug into it, started to do our work, and came up with a plan that we felt like we could execute, and more importantly, we felt like the golfer would care about it, and we were right.
That's awesome. And then so you had Tony and Joe with you through the start of Toulon Design,
and my wife Kathy, who was basically running the all the operations of the company, which is amazing.
Yeah, and she is amazing. Shout out to Kathy. Yeah, she's been so nice. Like, just side note, I've had so many conversations with her over the last couple of days now.
Yeah,
she's just so nice. Like, she's just such a lovely woman.
Yeah,
like,
she's awesome.
Well, and there's definitely a balance within the Toulon family as well. Like, I have, from an outsider's perspective, I have experience with Joe too. Like, I've talked with Joe and connected with Joe about other stuff, and like, there's definitely a balance within the family, and it's great because you guys all feed off of each other. I think that you guys all have very unique strengths, and nobody, I haven't seen anybody within the family, especially with the new stuff, of trying to like overlap or trying to go into something that is not their thing. Like, it seems like there's a lot of, you're a very race person, right? Like, you're kind of like me, where you need the component that slows you down sometimes, but at the same time, if you weren't the way you are to keep going, the stuff that you've done probably wouldn't happen, right? And I need that in my life too. Like, I'm the person that's thinking. I had somebody make the joke the other day. We were talking about Made for the Range and what I was doing, and I laid out this like beautiful plan to get to where I want to be in 5 years. And he looked at me and he's like, "What are you doing on Tuesday?" I was like, "I don't know. No idea. Like, no clue." Like, I'll figure that out on Tuesday. And so it's there's a perfect balance here, and we'll get into that when we talk about the new Toulon. But so the years at Callaway, you had Joe and Tony. Joe is now the manager of all tour. His title might be fancier than that now.
I don't know exactly what his title is, but he basically is in charge of the PGA Tour for Callaway.
Yeah, because Cody is now the rep.
Tour
Joe
operations.
used to be the rep, and now
Correct.
Cody's rep.
Yep.
So now
he's just doing a wonderful job there. Really proud of him.
Yeah, and your work at Callaway, I know that you didn't necessarily work on the teams like directly for some of the other product outside of Odyssey and Toulon, but you were, I would say, you probably got consulted on most of the stuff that came out.
So I ran all of industrial design for all products there.
Okay.
So in many ways, I had the same job there that I did at Callaway.
Oh, see, I thought it was just for Odyssey. Okay.
No. And then I was also, of course, general manager of Odyssey, running all of Odyssey.
Yeah.
So I was involved and in charge of industrial design for all products, and heavily involved in all the product strategy stuff.
So that's Epic Flash through.
Started with Epic.
Okay. Oh, with just Epic. Okay, so you were from a year.
I got there right.
A year late then. Okay.
Right when we were kind of making the final changes to the product.
Sure.
And was able to do a couple of things on that one. Yeah. And then everything after.
That's actually really interesting because I switched. So after M2, I went Epic Flash Sub-Zero, and I have since then played a Callaway Tour Driver.
Nice. Which
is just super convenient that was when you switched over as well. That's actually hilarious. I didn't realize that until this point. Because I honestly, I thought it was just the Odyssey stuff, just because, again, I think that's how people know you now, because your name is physically on those products,
right.
With the work that Tony and Joe did over there too. So moving through the evolutions of Callaway, instead of getting into the whole thing like you did with TaylorMade, what's the one thing that really stands out to you from the years that you guys spent with the Callaway Odyssey team?
The R&D at Callaway is so robust and so resourced and important to that company. It's amazing. I mean, there's nothing like it. TaylorMade's got great R&D. They don't have what Callaway has. Titleist has got great R&D, and I'm not privy to what Titleist looks like now in golf ball and things like that, but I can just tell you that the capabilities and resources that Callaway allocates towards R&D is mind-blowing, and they're amazing.
So I was with you when what is now called AI milled was Toulon AITI, I think was like the full name at the start of it or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And I was with you hitting the very first iteration of a Chicago that had the AI face with it. And I now realize you're a very passionate person about all your products. You get very, very excited about pretty much everything that comes out. But I had not up until that point, so basically 2 years into the industry at that point, with all these reps, all these company executives, and all these people that I had talked to about the products, I had never seen an individual so excited about something. So that work with AI, what did that mean to Callaway? Because it seems like they had AI jailbreak, but it doesn't seem like AI jailbreak hit the ceiling of what Callaway really wanted the AI stuff to be. And to me, with everybody that I knew at Callaway and still know, it felt like the innovation to the topography on the back of those putter faces was the moment that like they felt like the AI was finally giving them the years and years of R&D that they put into it.
Yeah, I think just in general, Jake, the Callaway team is learning, I would say daily on how AI can impact their business and the performance of their products. And it's only as good as the inputs. So, and then the computing power, and so they're learning, and they're going to continue to get better and better and better, which means they're also going to get faster and faster and faster, and it will be a competitive advantage. It is already.
Yeah.
And I think it's only going to just continue. And a lot of companies are now saying, AI.
Oh, yeah, everybody's starting.
And I can tell you, it's not the same.
Yeah, they wrote their press release with AI,
right?
And now the whole thing is influenced by AI.
Yeah.
So now we are in the third iteration of Toulon as its own company. So we had the stint alone, now at a Callaway, and now back alone. So now we're Toulon Golf. What's the catalyst for why this needed to exist? I guess that's a weird way of asking that question, but to leave Callaway and to move back to doing it on your own, right? I think that's for a lot of people that would be a really not weird, but a lot of people would feel like that was a step back, and it's not, and that's
right.
That's kind of where I want to hit.
I'm sure a lot of people would think that.
Yeah.
So let me answer the question this way. One, and I'm not comparing myself other than age to this man, just so you know, that when I was contemplating it at age 63, it's like, why would you do that? Ely Callaway was 63 years old when he founded Callaway Golf. So think about it. And again, I'm not saying I'm Ely Callaway any stretch of the imagination, but at that age, you'd think, why would you do it? And he did, and other people have, and I have a ton of energy and a lot of excitement. So number one, and knock on, by the way, this is a Camp Randall table.
Yeah, Bucky Badger.
Bucky Badger.
Shout out, my little sister went there, and you know that, but so shout out to my little sister for Wisconsin.
But I have a lot of energy, and I'm in good health, and so I feel awesome. And I feel like there's a lot to do. When you get a chance to work with your sons, it's incredible. And, the first time around working with Tone and Joe was great. And now Tony and Preston joining us, it's amazing. And, who knows, maybe over time, sometime, Joe joins the team. He's doing a wonderful job at Callaway and is happy there, and he should be. If he ever decides he'd like to come over, I'm sure we'll find a desk for him. But but to be able to work with your boys is amazing. And then for me personally, aside from that, when you have these jobs like I had, whether it was at TaylorMade or at Callaway, and you're in the middle of a pretty important job in a big company, you end up spending your time doing a lot of things that really don't drive you professionally
Sure.
Or personally.
Or creative.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, which is fine. It's just, that's what those jobs are. You manage people and the things, the challenges and issues that come with that and the rewards that come with that. But what got me most excited is being able to sit down and create products that when a golfer sees it for the first time, they go like, oh my God, I have to have this, right? Like, holy, that's what we're after. And when you have the jobs that I've had over the past 15 or 20 years, you don't get as much time to do that. So now the fact that I get to do it with my family, including my wife, and Press and Tone and Toru, who is amazing. And, we have a small team that will grow, I'm sure. It's super rewarding.
Yeah, it has been. So he's sitting over there behind our other cameras. But so I met Preston through his previous job and my previous job. When I was working at Club Champion, I met Preston through Mitsubishi. And I think for the first couple of times I talked to Preston, I remember like not wanting to ask him about you, but at the same time like wanting to ask him about you. And then I came out here for a trip, and we did those videos at Callaway. And I've told people the biggest difference. So first off, I'll say it this way: if you ask golf industry people, right, who's the nicest person in the golf industry, I have heard one of two answers from every individual. It's you and Chris Fishall, right? I have not gotten a different answer besides those two people. And most of the time they say both because people don't like to decide. But it's one of those things
I've
where
never met Chris, but I heard he's a nice guy.
I haven't either. I have had chats with Chris. I shook his hand at PGA Show last year really quickly. But I am excited actually, hopefully this year, to get to do some stuff with Chris. But the idea that you trying to figure out how to word this right. The second time I met you, you came right up to me, shook my hand, and you're like, "Hi, Jake, how are you doing?" There was no reason you needed to remember who I was. We had like a half an hour interaction the first time we met. We did some stuff on camera. It was really fun. But like at your level and at your bravado within the industry, like there was no reason for that. And I can tell you right now, you are one of, I think, two people at your level in the golf industry that have done that. And but to me, that's who you are. Like you're that person, and the connection that you guys now have here inside. And going back to, me trying not to make it awkward talking about somebody who's sitting 10 feet away from me, is Preston has helped me more than anybody else at this point. And getting closer with you guys and even with Tony and your wife and Joe, I can see why, right? I can see how Preston got to the attitude and the empathy and the drive that he's at, and how he has influenced me with some of that stuff. He also has this weird ability to like understand people somehow, and because he's pointed me twice now on paths that I probably would not have thought about. And I will always give him credit for that. But it's just it's one of those things where I can see it, right, within you and within your wife. I'll give her a lot of credit too, because now having, it's only been like 48 hours, but I feel like I know her very well now over 48 hours. It's so easy to see. So to see everybody come together and do this, and I've seen Tony throw things on Instagram of like the grandkids are in here riding bikes or whatever, and right now we're at the very beginning stages of whatever this next chapter ends up becoming. And we have the new 2024 line. But I think people also need to understand, like, I watched you build 3 small batch putters to get shipped out. And we had, we talked yesterday, I was talking to your wife at the house about people that call in, and she's like, "Oh, I don't know the answer. I'll let you talk to Sean." And then people are like, "Wait, am I talking to Sean too?" and for you and for like Preston and your wife, it's like, yeah, you're talking to Sean. That's great. Like, congratulations. It's just Sean.
They don't always know me as the nicest person in golf, by the way.
but that's cool. I don't think people realize that you're talking on the phone to just normal customers. You're answering some of the emails. You're building the putters.
Love doing it.
Yeah.
I do love doing it.
That part is really cool, and I'm trying to figure out more ways, and we're working on a bunch of content together too, which I'm really thrilled to be a part of. I think that that's going to be something that, as this gets bigger and bigger, I can't wait to see what that becomes and what else comes out and the new stuff. But yeah, I think this iteration has been built from the last two. I think that obviously there was a ton of stuff, and I know you still have some relationships with like a ton of people that you met through Callaway and like supply chain stuff like that, and there's still support that exists there. I don't think it was I think it's important to say like nothing bad happened at Callaway. Like,
no, just the opposite.
Yeah, it was
just the opposite. Everything that has happened since we left, or to really facilitate this happening again, has come from Chip Brewer, who is a dear friend, and Tim Reed, who is a dear friend. They've been amazing to us and continue to be so. So we have a wonderful relationship with them that's going to continue, hopefully forever.
Yeah, just
right?
perpetuity. Yeah.
I get to be with those guys actually still quite a bit, and the things that we built over 8 years of putting together a world-class supply chain. Mark Leposki, another one, amazing guy. So for us, we're able to tap into all of these things that we helped build together when I was there with Tone, and our capabilities are they're not amazing, they're incredible, and it shows up in these products. I mean, when you see, well, you've seen it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What we're going to launch here in a month, knowing that we got started in July, and we're going to launch 11 models of right-handed putters and 3 lefties, and they're magnificent, incredible. I'll put them up against anything. I believe they truly are the most beautiful milled putters in the world. I do.
Yeah, when I got wind of this all happening, because Preston kept me informed of some things in the most vague way possible. I thought for sure, right? I was like, okay, so this is going to happen next year. We're going to get a Madison, we're going to get a Vegas, and they're going to throw one more at us. And then when I started to talk to you guys about planning for the content that we've been doing, and all, 8 of the heads plus different hosel selections for some of them, plus the left-handed stuff, I was like, whoa. We went from what I thought was going to be 3 right-handed only models,
right,
maybe in a couple of next selections, to the entire lineup plus 2 brand new models and a very heavily redefined Memphis. So really there's...
On top of that, think of all the small batches, and almost every one of those is a ground-up design, right?
Yeah, the small batch thing is a whole other discussion about what you guys are doing with that, and I don't think people realize that the small batch stuff is... It's so hard to, do it at the frequency that you guys are doing it at. I think that's incredible, the fact that you guys are basically busting one of those out a month, if not closer to like 45 days. But still, I think that's incredible amounts of work. And the design process that has to go into those is way deeper, because once the 2024 lineup is done, that's your lineup until you change the lineup or you change technology or you find something new. But with small batch, you're not just taking a head, stripping it of its current finish and changing it to something else. Like, that is not what a small batch putter is. Like, we just saw you build a Sea Island this morning, which is beautiful putter. Those turtles are crazy cool.
Thank you.
But to go through small batch, so let's dive into that just a little bit as we go in, because the 2024 product, we're going to have a ton of videos on. There's going to be a bunch of content from the Toulon team. I'm going to have a bunch of it as well. And then, the media is going to catch on to that really quickly. And when those are available for people to buy, I think it's going to shoot just extremely quickly, because I think people are really happy that you're still continuing to do this. But with small batch, what's the process there? Like, is that like you woke up in the middle of the night with a dream for a putter head and you start drawing it and making it? Or like, is it a little bit more thoughtful than that?
It's both.
Okay.
But that whole concept is Tony, which we started executing against about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When we were still at Odyssey, and that was really the Toulon brand in the middle of this juggernaut called Odyssey, which is dependent on lots of energy, lots of designs, and the team at Odyssey is it's not huge. It's there's nice resources there, but it's not a big team. So it required pretty much all of the brain power and manpower that we had to create products for Odyssey, which means Toulon didn't get much attention there. Right, wrong, indifferent. But so Tony wanted to make sure that we were moving the brand forward somehow, and he's the one who really came up with this whole idea.
That's awesome.
For small batch, and it was really based on 6 words, which was always new, always cool, always rare. So new, rare, cool. And so what does that look like? Well, that model now creates sort of a structure that's needed to be able to create those products. So, some of the design work is, heavily inspired by designs that we'd already done.
From a head shape perspective, yeah.
But not so simple.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not a graphic package and a new finish, and
no, it's far from that. Yeah.
So it because they all get redone, which means it's all new CAD, it's all new cam, it's all new fixturing, it's new tooling, it's new. It's a ton of work.
Well, it's freaking expensive to do all that for 75 putters too. I think people need to understand that we're talking usually less than 100 putters. Actually, I don't know.
Always less than 100.
Yeah, I was saying, I don't think any of them have a triple divot.
No.
But like, it's so expensive to do that.
Yep. And we've been able to put together the right team to be able to do that. So we'll start first at the design phase. So that's an idea, typically an idea, and it could be the inspiration can come from anywhere. So we just finished Santa Monica. When is this going to go? When are people going to hear this? I want to know if I can launch a product here or not.
I don't think we can do. I'll blur out. No, I'll forget to blank this out.
Okay, so Latrobe. So Latrobe will be the next one, right? And so Latrobe, when you think about it, it's Latrobe after Arnold Palmer. He was the one who really was instrumental in the design of the 8802 in 1964, which is just this incredible, iconic shape that almost all great putters at one point in time have used a putter like that, if not that one. So, all right, if you were going to do that, if that's an important putter, and Arnold Palmer is, who he is or remains to be, and was in the game, that's something there's a real story there. So we like to be able to tell a story. Ideally, it would be about a place, a person, and a product. And this Preston calls it a love letter. Really, the product itself is, which I think is totally apropos. And so when you look at the next one being Latrobe, and this tribute to Mr. Palmer, that design, an incredible place, and then you combine that with the capabilities that we have with a material called 904L, which is an amazing material, and what we want to do to try to take a design like that, which was now 60 years old, and make it so that it's not just something you put up, on the mantle, but can go out and play great golf with. What would that look like? Now that brings into play metallurgy and hardcore engineering and supply chain capabilities and all these kind of things. And then you're going to do 75 of them, and the suppliers at first look at you like you got 3 eyes sticking out of your forehead. And then, but they've all jumped on board with us on this journey to create something special for the golfer, and we're able to do it. And it's super unique. And to your point, to be able to do one, virtually every month in super small quantities, and they sell out really fast. It's very, very cool. And for us, it connects us to the heart and soul and spirit and the honor of the game. But it also allows us creative freedom and flexibility, and kind of keeps us exercising those muscles, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the freedom that you guys have with those, because it can be anything you want. It can be it can be shapes that you've never tackled before, and maybe we finally get the Toulon flavor of that. And I think the other thing too that you and I have talked about with small batches, small batch can also become kind of like an R&D mini phase for a shape that you might want to add to the stock collection.
Definitely an incubator.
Like if something just really goes off and you get all these requests of like, hey, I know you made 75, but does there happen to be one laying around or whatever? And you get more and more of those requests or tour feedback. I know is a big one. I think that's a huge thing for you guys to do micro testing on a level, but like you also know that the testing and the feedback that comes out of those releases is arguably the best feedback you can get because of what they spent on the putter and how loyal they are to those putters and the feedback there.
Our customers are amazing. Yeah. They've just been amazing. Yeah.
No, I'm so excited about what you guys are doing now, and to make sure that this doesn't end up being our whole day, we can start to wrap up here, but we'll definitely do another one of these in the future too. I think an update would be great.
Honored to be with you on your first one, bud.
I think this is, it's going to be very cool.
We love what you're doing too. And
thank you.
We'll do everything we can to support you as best we can.
I appreciate that. I'm super happy to be on this journey. I think these podcasts are going to be cool too. Like having people like yourself willing to sit down, I think is going to really impact some people.
If Chris is as nice as people say, he should be number 2.
I'm hoping Chris ends up being on. I think he's going to be.
If he big times you, call me. I don't know him, but I'll help.
I'll make sure I just send that.
I'm
to
sure
Vishal, and be like, hey, here's your pressure. No, Chris is a great guy, and he's already actually he's helped me with the Mizuno team a little bit.
That's great.
So
it's a wonderful company too.
Yeah, I imagine he's going to be later this year. Probably Chris will jump on. But did you see the white Mizuno? Did you see that the other day?
No.
Yeah, so Mizuno's having a special release matte white crown Mizuno STZ.
I love it.
It actually looks really sick. I wanted to not like it. Like there was a bunch of us within the industry have been talking about it because we're all like, all right, like who needs this to be brought back? And we're all pretty much just negative about it because we knew it was coming. And then we see the pictures and we see the in-hand stuff. All of us were like, all right, this is pretty sick. It's pretty cool.
That's fun.
So yeah, that's a little nugget there. But so the 2024 stuff, guys, is releasing in just a few days as of this podcast going up. Thank you again for sitting down and for everything here. Excited to keep working with you guys for sure.
Thank you.
It'll be fun.
Nice to be with you.
Hey, Preston, can you do me a favor? In that camera bag over there.
Was this 9 hours long, Press? Okay.
50 or 15? Oh, okay, that's not that bad. In that bag, there is a cup that I would like to give to your dad.
Oh.
Yeah, I want to take a picture with. It's fine. It can be a decoration.
I do use these. Oh my God, I'll use that. That is awesome.
I had these made, so here I'll try to show this to that camera. Yeah, so yours is a little special because it's got first on there.
Oh, that is so awesome. And I do use it, as you know.
Yeah.
I get to the office early. Usually I'm here a little after 5. And I need something to load up with coffee to bring here. So this is like a new age thermos.
Yeah, it's actually awesome. So it's a Orca with they made that golf ball texture. So I'm going to be able to give all the podcast guests one of those, and yours says first on it. But I'm very happy about that. So
Great.
I should have had you do it first, and I would have thrown your coffee in there. On the table, but the Masters mug is pretty sick too.
No problem.
All right. Yeah, if you're watching this, you're watching it on YouTube, and then obviously you're gonna do some social podcast clips. But I have no idea if this is on Spotify or anything yet. Haven't really figured that out. But thanks for watching on YouTube, everybody. Make sure you stay tuned for the 2024 release from Toulon, and I know people are gonna love it.
Great. Thanks so much.
All right.